If you've ever come up against something difficult and wondered, what do you do next? Well, I'm glad you're here for this conversation today. Hi, I'm Rob, and it's great to be able to catch up with you for a few moments here today. I want to mention our interactive teaching videos available for kids and families, and a simple search for Cabin Kids on Facebook will take you right to our page and to that resource. And as you may know, our focus here in these videos springs from the same themes, scriptures as our family videos that we just mentioned. Our goal is to equip people of all ages for faith conversations that can be helpful as we walk with Jesus together. Now, this month we've been looking at how things happen in life. Sometimes we can feel like we got the wind knocked out of us. It can seem like often we need reminders of how God is strong, He's faithful, and He's always at work in our lives. Jesus showed us often how to face life with resilience. And because of Jesus, we can trust God no matter what. Things may knock us down, but not out. But today is a unique day for us as a congregation because this is a time when we evaluate how we've been doing and where we're going as a congregation over the next years. And so I invite you to join me for what we can discover today in our scripture, as well as hear some thoughts about how our congregation is continuing to grow and develop. Not too long ago, our family was trying to sort through what it meant to have a good birthday gift for a 19-year-old. Now, sometimes the siblings were kind of working through what it is that they needed to do for their youngest brother, but what they decided to do was surprise him with a trip to go bungee jumping. And this was something that he was all in for, and as they kind of developed it, they all made the decision they were all going to go. And so they got there, and my wife and I were with them at the time, and so we were just planning to observe. And as they started kind of talking with the folks there, they discovered there was one more available spot. And I kind of got poked a few times to say, Dad, we think you should go. We think you should give it a shot. And so after a little bit of consideration, I said, okay, yeah, I do want to. Let's do it. So this was a 200-foot bungee jump that was over top of an old rock quarry. And so there was water in the bottom. And, from the ground looking up, it didn't look like it was that threatening. So I said, okay, yeah, I'll go for it. So while I'm watching, not too bad. And I get up to the area where the platform is, and I'm waiting to go, and I'm kind of thinking, okay, this is not too bad. And get all the straps and harnesses all on, and I'm thinking, okay, this is still not too bad. But then when I stepped out on the landing to go, that's when I felt not so good. Looking down at 200 feet to the little bit of water and the rock face that was below, I'm thinking, my feet are tied in, and this is crazy for me to go because I'm going to go head first down there. But if I don't go now, I'm going to regret it. It was a simple decision at that point. Will I go or will I walk away? And I chose to go. And I yelled the whole way down, "Aha!" But now, as I look back, I'm glad I went. It was a pretty wild thing, really. And if you're up for it, let me encourage you to give it a shot. But as you think about it, a bungee jump, well, you kind of end up putting your confidence in something that really doesn't make a lot of sense at all, right? I mean, really, it's just a glorified rubber band. But when things look difficult in our lives, when we come up against challenges and we look out and it just seems like, I don't know what to do next, well, things get simple. Will we go or will we not go? And there's all kinds of emotions when you look down into that moment, and you have to ask yourself, what will you do with them? What decision will you make? Because we've all faced moments like that. Maybe it hasn't been bungee jumping, but there's been challenging moments where there have been difficult decisions and you're wondering, how will this go? Will I go for it or will I walk away? And over the last couple of years, to some degree, we've all felt that way at different points. Kind of that question we've asked, what will I do now? I mean, things are changing, there's decision points, there's places where I have to figure out what I'm going to do next, how am I going to respond to this? The author of Hebrews was dealing with a group of people who were similarly on the edge of a number of choices, and the culture around them had been shifting significantly. There was a part of the decision making they had to get to say, well, if I continue to follow Jesus right now, well, there's going to be some more difficult times in front of me. And if I walk away, I'll probably always regret it the rest of my life. But life would be easier. I mean, there'd be less inconvenience. There'd probably be a lot less discomfort and less disruption. And even when it comes to the people that I live near, there's probably a lot less confusion with them. I mean, even some of the physical harm that may come to me, I might be able to bypass that. So the question is, what decision will they make? And how will they decide whether they're going to keep going or whether they're going to walk away? Well, in Hebrews chapter 12, we see a few verses here that kind of give us a bit of an indication as to what happened for them, and it helps us to discover how God is continuing to move us, not only as individuals, but as a congregation, as we look to the days and months ahead. They just finished reading the section that would have had this long list of people in Hebrews 11 that had persevered with God, and this is what comes next. So because of this long list of people, or the word therefore starts the text, since we are surrounded by such a huge cloud of witnesses to the life of faith, let's strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up, and let us run with endurance the race that God has set before us. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame. Now he's seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. Think of all of the hostility he endured from sinful people, then you won't become weary and give up. Now, if you were looking for a memorable way to remember what's being said here, there are three words that kind of come to mind in this. One of them is prepare, and then participate, and persevere. We prepare in this text by getting ready for the race, being ready for what God is leading us into. He uses the image of races in this day. And you may be aware that in the era where this was written, little to no clothing was worn when there was a race happening, because they wanted nothing to slow them down. They wanted to make sure that they were fit and trim in terms of extra weight or other things that might slow them. So they had to kind of let go of some things in order to prepare to simplify for the journey that was before them. But not only that, they had to decide to participate by getting into the race, to make sure they were actually part of the crew that was running, to not walk away and just realize that there was so much more to discover that lay ahead. But they also had to persevere. And he uses the word endurance, to hang in there, not to quit because it becomes difficult. And that's been our theme throughout this month of troubles. And then he refers to how Jesus hung in there, and to see how he helps even when times get tough. Some of you may be familiar with the Michael Oher story. It's portrayed in the movie Blindside. It's a young man who is in need of help, and a family who took the hard road to actually incorporate them into their circle of love and in their household. And although this is admirable, It's not an arrangement that at all would have been easy. I've witnessed this and know that it's difficult enough to raise kids that have adapted to the world that they live in from birth, let alone the challenges and the pain, and I've witnessed some of the frustration of taking on family members who are already imprinted with so many different directions in life. So for them just to work together as a family wouldn't always be ideal, let alone helping Michael grow and contribute to life. The Michael Orr story is actually quite amazing, and I'd encourage you to look it up and see the true story of this young man. The movie gives some snippets of the challenges, and it's really helpful to get a perspective. But you can only imagine the day-to-day roller coaster that it must have been of the good and the bad and even the ugly, day-to-day, working out life together. Now, when I describe the last couple of years, that's kind of what I think of, is that it's been a bit like a roller coaster ride. Not always fun, maybe a little longer than I would have expected, seemingly sometimes like there's no reasonable end in sight. And I know that as a congregation, we've done some things well, and some other things we've struggled in, and maybe not done so well. So as we come into this next year as a church and as a congregation together, we can identify that the roller coaster has probably been both a good thing and a bad thing. Some of the good things are that there's some places where we've really adapted well. We've stayed stable as a congregation during these days. We've discovered some new options as to the way we can explore ministry, and in many ways we've even become more nimble or flexible as we look to the future. But in ways it's been a bad thing too, because people in our congregation, and even for all of us, we've felt in many ways isolated. There are habits that we've kind of come into that now are extremely hard to break. And there are some people that have even walked away from folks that they love, or even the family unit they once loved. So as we think about the encouragement that we've seen here in Hebrews chapter 12, it may be like other times, but none of us have ever really walked in a time like this, like a pandemic before. Things like this have happened. So what does it look like for us to prepare or to participate and to persevere in this really challenging and difficult time in history? And to consider what it would mean as individuals and as a church to emerge well in the world that has changed so much in such a short time. In this season of COVID, there have been two places I believe God has been leading us, helping us to go, to, in some ways, look over the platform and to consider whether or not we're willing to jump. One of those areas, as we think about them, is in the area of family ministry. Now, Sundays, as I've mentioned, have been a roller coaster ride. For quite some time in our church, the openings and the infections and the cautions have kind of all bounced back and forth. Any pastor I've talked to recently has observed that some people have become comfortable in a lot of public settings and then have still even chosen to avoid church. And this is confusing here as we reopen, to say the least. But as we navigate through this changing approach, one big concern for us is the level of ministry we have with our families on Sundays. Currently, our volunteer base that was present prior to COVID is non-existent. We do understand that there are some of those people who are working through their concerns about proximity to anybody, let alone kids. But the way we did things prior to COVID is just not been possible. So during this season of COVID, we've discovered some new ways to approach ministry to families, to better equip them to become spiritual leaders in their homes. And too often, this spiritual leadership in the home is something that we can maybe vicariously end up outsourcing, thinking that there are other people that will teach our children what God has to say about their lives. But we all have a God-given responsibility to be intentional disciple makers in our homes, regardless of whether children live there or not. And our families often mirror attitudes towards so much more than what we'd like to admit, don't they? Including the way we practice and approach apprenticeship with Jesus. So over the course of the last couple of COVID years, we've discovered something that we know we want to explore further. There have been a few tools that we've kind of jumped in with, and a desire has continued to deepen to better equip families for this role that God has given, to better partner together with the development of character and faith in families is a journey that we're going to continue to mobilize into as a congregation. Family ministry, well, this doesn't just mean that this is for children's ministry or teen ministry. It's kind of not just their job. This is something that we're all in with together. We all need mentoring and coaching in this lifelong journey that we're all in of following Jesus. And we need encouragement from cheerleaders who care about us personally. And this really makes it a full church press. If you've raised children or not, families need all of us, regardless of our age or stage. There are other important voices that are needed for investment, for encouragement, and they're all part of the process of family ministry. So that includes all of us. The value of parents taking spiritual leadership in their homes is something that we'll have to explore in more creative ways as time goes by. But Cabin Kids Live is one resourcing option that we've been exploring, and it really is just beginning to scratch the surface. This area of leadership and spiritual leadership in our own homes, this is a key battleground, and it won't really happen easily. As we look to this fall, well, we want to make the adjustments needed for all families to be able to be ministered to on weekends and to keep the conversation going through the week. So, what can you and I do on this journey? Well, all of us, we can consider volunteering to serve in some way with ministry to families. It could include encouraging families by including them in our lives and getting to know them. It could include praying for some of those families and children that are connected to our congregation by name. Maybe as you get to know a few of them and continue to include them in your life. There are probably going to be some adjustments and some different things that we need to do in order to better accomplish this. It may include some things in our weekend services as to how to connect with families, and there's so many more things for us to explore. And as we prepare and participate together, persevere in this area of ministry and connection, let me assure you, as I've mentioned, it won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight. And we'll likely make some mistakes along the way. As a congregation, I've been so encouraged that we've consistently had a heart to explore, to experiment with ways that we can discover to reach the generations we find ourselves in. So this will stretch us again as we mine our way through this critical area of ministry life. Second thing is in the area of collaboration. Every pastor I've encountered that's walked through this last couple of years has experienced the discouragement and exhaustion, and we've all walked and led and prayed and wept even over some of these days in our churches. And COVID has reinforced how churches need to walk and work together to be able to connect with people and reach them more effectively. We all know that there's some good days ahead and maybe even some great days ahead. And I'm convinced that as we look to them it can no longer be a solo walk like we have experienced pre-COVID. Many of you may be familiar with Parkway Church and Dusty Crozier. He spoke here in our setting a couple of weeks ago. As you may know, Dusty is the pastor of a recently planted sister Wesleyan church. Parkway is based in the Loyalist area, just a short drive to the west of us. And at this point, they are awaiting the renovation to be complete in their new building, a lease of a retail space in Bath. Now, during the last couple of years, Dusty and I have had numerous conversations, strategy talks, a prayer walk related to what it could look like for our two congregations to collaborate more fully, to explore what it would mean to invest in each other and to reach people in our region, maybe even through another currently non-existent congregational group to plant a church. Well, there are some obvious places where we can be stronger together, some things that we've discussed in the area of family ministry or even in teen ministry. Our online presence are just a few obvious low-hanging fruit options. But what does it look like for us to share resources and invest in each other with some future options too, in some of the places where it's not quite as natural? Well, you know what? We don't know all the answers to that. But we're ready to start to discover what that looks like on that journey together. In this past year, we celebrated Good Friday together. And in this time where they are not in a meeting place, they've been gathering here at our location for several events. And we're looking ahead, even in the next week, on Tuesday night, where we'll begin to share resources in teen ministry. And this has been a place of weakness for our congregation in the last few years, and I'm delighted to see us making moves in this area of ministry. Now, as this next year unfolds, we're going to be continuing to share and pray together about how we build each other up in various other ways and consider the prospect of a church plant rising from our two congregations and what that might mean for our region. At present, there's a name that we've settled on, and it's called Limestone Network. It's an operating title for our collaborative work together, Limestone Network Teens or Limestone Network Online, or other options that we can discover or explore that will use a relevant name like this as well. Now, to be clear, this is not a merger of churches, but it is an intentional partnership as we retain our unique identities as both Parkway and Kingston Standard, but also discover some new ways to work together in our region, to do what we couldn't have done alone. So, what does this mean for us today? What do you and I do with this? Well, it may include for you and I to just encourage a teen to participate this week on Tuesday night at 6 p.m. at the Boys and Girls Club here in Kingston. Or it may be to choose to give some weekly amount over and above our regular giving toward church planting in Kingston. It might be $5 a week or $10 a week or more as you look out to the year ahead so that more opportunities can be explored as we move down this road. Or it may be for you to pray about what God is doing in Kingston and how you can be part of it. Or to pray about how God may include you in His mission. We're preparing together. And we long to participate well and persevere in the mission that God has for us in this region. These are honestly multi-year initiatives that are in front of us. And I believe God is leading us in a way that will help us to emerge well from this series of COVID years. As we prepare and participate and persevere in this together, well, the fact is, nothing God has called us to here will be easy. I assure you this will be challenging, and it will occasionally find us in a place where we might want to ask ourselves if it's worth it. And maybe even we might feel like we just want to quit. Maybe a little bit like the people who first read Hebrews. But if I quit, I'll probably always regret it. Life will be easier, less inconvenient, less disruptive, less discomfort. But if what God leads us into will be easy, why would we need to trust Him? When we go through something troublesome, like we have for the last few years, it helps if we remember what Jesus was willing to do for us. The scripture says that Jesus loved us so much that He was willing even to die on a cross for our sin. All because it was part of the way God had planned it. Now, as we think about Jesus, that can encourage us as we look out and see difficulties in our lives and even ahead as we explore some of these initiatives. It can give us strength, give us hope. And these are things that really help us to emerge well when we're in difficult times facing something tough. And to help us to keep going and to keep growing as we emerge well. There are some wild emotions that I know I feel as I look down at this picture of what God, I believe, is leading us into. But right now, it's kind of as simple as our next step. We mentioned a few of those options earlier, to pray for families or children by name, to engage and serve in ministry with families in some way, to encourage a family by getting to know them. Maybe to give a weekly amount this year to invest in church planting in Kingston, or to pray about how God would involve you in His mission, or to help a teen show up this Tuesday night. So, what decision will you make? Let's take a few minutes and pray together. God, we acknowledge that there are times when you call us to things that are far larger than who we are. And we recognize that as we look out at some of the things that we've talked about today, there's a reality that's scary. There's a reality that is intimidating. There's a reality that won't be easy. It'll be sometimes in day to day very challenging. God, we believe you've called us to care for families in our region, to care for people in our neighborhoods, and to work together with other people who are following Jesus to better leverage opportunities to reach people in your kingdom. And so, God, for whatever that means and how that continues to look, and our place and our participation together, as simple or as complicated as it may become for each one of us, I pray that you would help each of us to engage. There are some simple practical steps we can take even today. And then there will be more steps that you will call us to as we continue together. I pray that you'll help us to make the decision to follow through and to engage with you in the mission that you are seeking to accomplish here in the Kingston area through us and through Parkway. We love you, and we're grateful to you for your kindness to us. In your name I pray. Amen. I want to thank you for taking a few minutes to spend this time together with us today. And before you go, if you don't mind taking just a moment to like, comment, or share this video, it's always an encouragement for us when you do. And if you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, or if you prefer Facebook and you'd like to like or follow us there, then I'd encourage you at the end of this video to follow through on that action so that you can be up to date with future releases. Also want to mention that a link in the description section of this video is available that will take you to our church website. And at that location, you'll find some resources for at-home worship, as well as a few other resources related to links to our church and some other questions and conversational options as you explore what God has been doing in you as a result of what you've heard today. As always, we're praying for you. We trust you're praying for us too, and we look forward to seeing you all again soon.